Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about retouching an image for a modeling agency. So I know I've had a lot of questions from you guys in the past about how you would go about approaching modeling agencies, and I think hopefully I've answered those questions in some of my recent videos. However, I really want to talk about now what you should potentially be preparing yourself for if you're still a beginner photographer or retoucher and you're working with agency models, and how you should be preparing to send those images off to a modeling agency. So I'm really going to be talking about the retouching components of that today, and we're going to go over a few little differences between how you would retouch one of these images specifically for a model's portfolio versus maybe something for your own portfolio or something that's maybe a bit more creative or even for a client. So I've chosen this image today of Elise, who is actually in my agency called Precision Management, and she is a model through that agency. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to show you guys how I would usually go about retouching an image when I'm going to send it to a model agent. Now, the key differences that we really need to be aware from the start about is going to be the fact that we're going to take a much more natural approach to retouching. We're not going to be doing too much crazy dodging and burning and color grading and all the rest of it like I would usually be showing you guys in other videos. But today we are going to focus on doing this retouch as naturally as possible. I've even actually taken this photo in natural light. And just to comment on this too, I've definitely found that shooting beauty in natural light can be a little bit harder to get the same amount of texture as when you are photographing in a studio. Obviously, if you're using strobe lights, that really does pick up a lot of texture on the model's skin, and it's not something that you really do have available when you're using natural light. So depending on how the light looks, of course, sometimes if you're in harsher light, it can give that effect, and it can give you a more textured effect on the skin. But I have found shooting, especially indoors, doesn't give you as much texture to work with. So even with this image, of course, we're going to be retouching it naturally to begin with because it's for a modeling agency, but also even more so because it's been shot in natural light. We're really not going to tamper with the skin tone too much. We really want to keep as much texture intact as possible so it's nice and sharp. So first off, I'm going to start my dodge and burn layers. So you guys have probably seen me do this a million times before. I'm going to quickly run through it. So going over to here, I would usually create a new blank layer and call this healing. And then I would go down to the adjustment layers here and create my dodge and burn. So curves, adjustment layer, and then we'll move this line up so it's nice and bright. Control I to invert, and we'll name that dodge. Now we'll make our burn layer. So the same thing again, curves, adjustment layer, but moving the line down, and Control and I, renaming that burn. Okay, so first off, we're going to start with the healing layer. Now, be very careful with this layer because we really don't want to go too far with the healing tools. This is what I would usually use on this layer to get rid of any little bumps on the skin or any unevenness that is kind of more in a blemish form. So let's go over to the healing tools over here. I would usually use the spot healing brush tool, or you can use the clone stamp tool. I know a lot of people prefer to do this. Today, we're just going to use the spot healing brush tool and be quite specific with what bumps we're removing. So we're just going to remove some of the little distractions just up here, because you also have to take into consideration what are the model's best features, or what features are you really trying to show off for the model's portfolio. With Elise, her eyes are beautiful and they really do stand out in an image. So I'm going to focus on brightening them up in a little bit and making sure that there's no distractions around the eyes that are sort of going to stray your attention away from that. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you are retouching for a model's portfolio, is making sure that you are showing their best features. So I'm just going to continue removing some of these little bumps just here on the skin. As I said, we are not going to do too much here, just a few little adjustments with this layer. The rest will fill in with dodge and burn. And just moving on to down here as well. And I'm going to speed through this process so you guys can see the end result a little bit quicker. Okay, so now I've zoomed in, I'm actually going to go to my dodge layer, and to create my dodging brush, I would usually just grab the brush tool, paintbrush tool, and then we would make sure that the hardness is at 0%, so nice and soft. and we'd make sure the brush size is quite small. So for this image, I would say probably about maybe around 20 pixels for now. And then I would move the flow to 1% so we can really hone in on certain areas of the pores and sort of fill in those uneven sections. So as well, I usually like to go over to the brush settings over here and click transfer, and making sure that pen pressure is selected there. So that'll make sure we can really be quite detailed with our dodging. Now I'm going to start filling in some of those uneven patches just on certain areas of the skin tone. But we are not going to go too far with this. We want to make sure that it is quite natural and that we're not doing too much. So just filling in those little bits there, and I'm going to fast forward through this. So once again, you guys can see the end result a little bit quicker and see the process. I just want to make a note for you guys, and just make a note on the fact that I'm being quite light-handed with this. I'm really just skimming in some of those kind of uneven areas, trying to keep as much texture intact as possible. There's not really much rhyme or reason as to where I start with dodging and burning. As I've often said before, I just kind of go wherever my eye draws me to potential distractions or blemishes or things that need to be evened out. And not forgetting to use the burn tool as well. So to use the burn tool, I'm just going to fill in some of these lighter patches on the darker shadowed areas of the skin and make sure that all blends nicely. So I'm just switching back and forth between dodge and burn and blending those areas of the skin tone together. And you might realize that I'm not really getting in too close with this. I'm not going into every little pore and every little detail, because the thing is, I want to keep as much texture as possible, and if I do that, I'm really going to make the skin look too smooth and it's going to look too doll-like for a model agent to want to put that in a model's portfolio. So we want to keep it natural and just remembering that we're showing off the best features of the model too. And I highly recommend not removing any main freckles or moles or anything like that that is stand out on a model's face. I personally never really do that anyway because I don't see the need to. And I think that it's sort of taking away from a model's look or a model's natural skin tone. But I think it's especially important when you are sending through images to a model agency, because obviously they need to see those features, and those images will be used to pitch models to clients and things like that, or brands in the future. So they really need to be able to see, what the model's face naturally does look like for the most part. Okay, so I've done my basic, mainly dodging and a little bit of burning there. So what I'm going to do now is my global dodging and burning. So we've just done local dodging and burning closer up. And now I'm going to make my brush size a bit bigger. And selecting the burn tool for starters, I'm just going to go over those areas where it needs like a little bit more softening with a bigger brush. And just filling in some of those areas where we need a bigger brush to do so. Okay, so that is mainly most of our dodging and burning done. And no, it is not perfect. You'll see that close up, there's still quite a bit of like facial fuzz and things like that we're actually not going to really worry about removing because that's fine. We don't need to remove every little part. We want to keep it fairly natural. And really, you won't have too many brands that are going to be zooming in so close to see anything like that anyway. So we are going to leave that intact. We don't want to tamper with the texture too much. What I am going to do is I'm going to do a bit of painting though, just over some of these patchy areas here. So you can see where we've dodged and burned around these areas. There's a bit of oversaturation and patchiness with the coloring. So to fix this, I would usually create a new layer on top and we'll call this color match. Then I'm going to get the paintbrush tool. I'm going to make it a bit larger. And I'm going to select a color from around the mid-tone of the skin tone. And making sure my flow is still at 1%, I'm going to start to paint softly over those areas where I feel like there needs to be a little bit more evenness on that skin tone, just in those patches. And just a little bit there. And even just... And keep selecting from different areas of the skin tone so you can make sure that everything is going in even. So just like a few areas there and just here as well. And a little bit on the chin. So as you can see, I've just used the eyedropper tool to keep selecting areas of the skin tone and giving us a bit of variety with the color that we're using. Now what I would do is I would set the blending mode of this layer to color. And if we turn that on and off, you can see that that's really filled in those areas. So turning that off, you can see there's a bit of desaturation here, there's a bit of oversaturation here and here, a bit of redness. And just by doing that, we've really evened out that whole area there. So I'll do another before and after of that layer. You can see it's quite minimal with the difference, but there is definitely a difference. I'm going to give you guys a before and after from now to the beginning when we started. So this is the before and this is the after currently. So we're not quite done yet. We are going to just tweak the dodging and burning a little bit more just to make sure it's a little bit less patchy. And then we're going to brighten the eyes and color grade the image. So I'm just going to make a few further adjustments with dodging and burning just to make sure that we've evened out the light and dark patchiness on the skin tone here. So I'd actually get the burn layer and I would start just blending that in a little bit more. So I'm actually going to leave the eyebrows as they are. I'm not going to be drawing on eyelashes and eyebrows today. That's not the point of this exercise. It's definitely to, as I said before, keeping it looking pretty natural. So I'm just going to fill in with the burn tool just over the eyebrows and just roughly darken them a little bit. And just run it over the eyelashes as well. And I'm also going to go to the dodge layer and now we're going to brighten up the eyes a bit. So you can move the flow up a little bit for this just to make sure it's brightening it up pretty well. And I'm not going to go too far. And I'm also going to go and make another layer on top, and I'm going to rename this one Eyes. And I'm going to enhance Elisa's eye color. So I'm going to pick a color that's pretty similar to her eye color in terms of vibrancy. And I'm going to just paint that over the top. And I would usually then change the blending mode to color dodge. So if we turn that on and off, and make sure that the opacity is not too high as well. I've left mine at about 46%. But you can see that just really enhances Elisa's eyes without going too over the top. I'm now going to finish off just evening out the skin tone just on Elisa's shoulders and neck, and then we are nearly finished. So just using the dodge and burn tools, just going to dodge. Just going to make sure my flow is at 1% again. And I'm just going to dodge some of those lines there on the neck, just to make it a little bit more even. And just on the chest there. So it might look like I'm doing a lot to the image. I just want to put this out there. It might look like I am doing quite a bit, but I am just being really quite considered and careful when I am placing the brush on the skin tone, and very light-handed too. We've pretty much finished the retouching now on the skin tone and other elements. So I'm just going to go to the before, and now this is the after. So what I would usually do at this point, especially when I'm editing these types of images, is go to the dodge and burn tools and look a little bit further into if we moved the sliders down a little bit, just to remove some of the work that we've done to make sure that we are sticking to a pretty natural look. So I would move the dodge down just a little bit, just to make sure I haven't moved too many shadows away that should be there. And I'll probably move the burn down a little bit as well. So I'll do a proper before and after. So just to give you guys a comparison, after I've moved those opacity sliders down, that's the effect that it's actually made. So you can see that I've removed a little bit of my work there, but it does actually give a little bit more of a natural shadow in certain areas, and it ensures that I haven't gone too far, and that's what I really want with this image. So going back to the before now, and then this is the after. And zooming out, so the before and the after. So now I would go on to skin color correction and color grading. I do this by using adjustment layers, and I would not do a lot to the image in this instance for a modeling agency. A lot of the time I would turn the images into black and white, or I would keep the color grade very minimal. So in doing this, I'm actually going to bring up a black and white layer. And as you guys might know already, I usually turn this to luminosity or change the blending mode. And I would just move the yellow slider down in this instance, and it actually gives a little bit more depth to the skin tone. However, we are making it look very saturated, so we're going to fix that in just a second. I might even just change the opacity of that a little bit. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring up another black and white layer. And we're going to move this slider all the way across, probably to about 10%. So you can see the difference. Even just the black and white layer by itself kind of makes to the skin tone. It just gets rid of that oversaturation. And then I'm going to get a selective color adjustment layer. So I'm going to get rid of some of the reds that are in the skin tone. It's quite saturated in the lighting that I shot this photo in. So we're going to move a little bit of the magentas down, make sure that the reds aren't too high, and the yellows just a little bit too. So you can see, turning that on and off, what a difference that can really make alone. And then what I would usually do as a finishing touch, I'm actually quite happy with how that looks. Like for a modeling portfolio, I would be pretty happy to send that off as is, to be honest. But for a color grade, something really simple, I usually would even just go to a photo filter and maybe warm it up a little bit. So in this case, I kind of like maybe this one here. It really gives a nice warm effect. So at about 14%, probably even a little bit less than that. Maybe at about 7%. So taking a snapshot again, this is the before image and that is the after. As a final touch to this, I would probably just grab a luminosity mask for increasing the brightness a little bit. So I'd go to channels, hold down Control and click down on RGB. And then we've got a selection for all the highlighted areas of the image. And I just want to make these a little bit punchier, a little bit brighter. So then I'd go back to my layers and then my adjustment layers down here. And I'd select levels. Then I would move this slider across just to make it a little bit brighter, but then we're only affecting the brighter areas of the image because of that selection we made. So in doing that, you guys can see the difference that really does make. So I'm just gonna move it down even a little bit less, make sure we're not pushing it too far. As a final touch, I still feel that the neck and the shoulder is a little bit of a different color. So that's one thing to watch out for as well. We really want everything to be looking pretty even. So I'm going to do one last final adjustment. I'm going to create a new layer and call it Body Retouch. As I've got my paintbrush tool selected, I'm going to actually select a color from the face, and we're going to do similar to what we did before. We're changing the blending mode. So I'll select a color that's around there. I'm then going to paint quite roughly over this area. As I said, it doesn't need to be perfect. And then I'm going to go to the blending modes, and this time I'm actually going to select hue, because hue can really work sometimes with color matching the face and the body together. Color can also work as well. Sometimes it comes off a bit too saturated, like in this instance it's coming up a bit too saturated for my liking. So I'm actually going to use hue this time. And we're maybe just going to bring down the opacity a little bit there too. So you guys can see that's just kind of matched in the color a little bit more. And guys, that is the finished product. So I'm going to do a full before and after quickly here. So this is the before image and this is the after. So it's not a huge difference compared to the before and after. We've just done a bit of skin retouching, enhanced the eyes and made sure color correction is all good throughout the skin tone. There's really not much of a color grade. I'm happy to leave that as is. As I said, I would usually convert it to black and white or choose a very minimal color grade on it. So I hope this video helped you out, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please hit the subscribe button because I'll be posting lots more content in the weeks to come. So thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.